Member for Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Chief Minister for bringing on this ministerial report, an update to the House and, of course, to Territorians on law and order. And I do want to start by talking about some of the contributions that we've already heard today, in particular from the Leader of the Opposition and the Member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑𝘼, who were, in fact, for the record, both Attorney-Generals in preceding governments which saw the Territory experience the worst crime crisis that ever has occurred. And so, firstly, let's talk about leadership and responsibility, which the Leader of the Opposition was bagging out the Chief Minister about her failure to be a leader. This is the first Chief Minister that I can remember in our history since the Labor government came into power, and remember it was 18 out of 23 years that they were in power, who's actually stood her ground right from the start. She came out in the election with our whole team promising Territorians that we would change the status quo. We were not going to accept crime in our community at the levels that it was, and we would make changes, and that we would also rebuild our economy. And of course, we had to fix crime and prioritise that as a #1 issue, deal with the laws that needed to be dealt with to be able to do that so we could rebuild our economy. She's stood steadfast in that. She's come out every single time explaining all of the steps that she has taken and our government ministers have taken to take back control of crime. And of course, from day one, she's not said that things are perfect. She hasn't said after 100 days that that's it, there's nothing else to be done. She's been really clear about that. There's still so much more work to be done. We are turning around a Territory that has been failing under a Labor government for so many years that that's not going to be an overnight fix, and nobody ever said it would be. So I take absolute offence to the fact that the Leader of the Opposition is calling her out on poor leadership, when the Leader of the Opposition and the Member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑 were both Attorney-Generals in those previous governments. And, Madam Speaker, I've heard a number of times today from the Opposition the words evidence-based, and we have to take an evidence-based approach. I am so sick to death of hearing those words from the Labor opposition, from the previous Labor government for years and years, ramming down the throat of Territorians every single time. The evidence that you were working on didn't work. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been in this situation that we had to fix. So stop saying it, because it's an absolute load of rubbish. Madam Speaker, many contributions talked about how the remand prisoners were through the roof and how there's too many. For the first time in a very, very long time, Madam Speaker, decades in fact, the number of sentenced prisoners now is more than the number of remand prisoners, and that's only in the last couple of months because of the changes that the CLP government have been making. That previous chart looked like a big crocodile jaw, Madam Speaker. It was going so far in the opposite direction, and only just recently, in the last couple of months, it's turned around. We're finally seeing it cross over because of the work that we have been doing. Madam Speaker, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition always likes to talk about this, and the Leader of the Opposition mentioned it again today, the fact that crime has gone up because we scrapped the minimum floor price. What a load of rubbish, Madam Speaker. The fact that people who are drunks are quite happy to pay $800 a bottle of rum in a community, that tells you that the minimum floor price was not actually working. It was one blunt tool that didn't actually make a 𝑂𝒂𝒃 of difference, otherwise it would have. So as we promised Territorians, we scrapped that when we came to government. So to sit there and say that that is a failed approach and that that's the reason why crime's increased just goes to show how out of touch they are. Madam Speaker, the so-called language around cuts to law and justice groups, what a load of rubbish, Madam Speaker. The fact is that Labor never funded them into the future. You cannot cut something that was never funded in the first place. And I need to be really clear with Territorians. This is a big piece of work which was done by the Labor government. It has cost a lot of money, taxpayers' money, Territorians' money. $500,000 per law and justice group which is already established. That's a lot of taxpayer money. And so we're not going to just go and expand them and increase them and make them the be-all and end-all. We want to know that it's actually working, Madam Speaker. And it's only just in its infant phase. And so we need to look at that data. We need to see if it's working, work out what's working, what's not, how much it's actually going to cost in reality, because I don't think Territorians want to pay $500,000 every single year for a group that deals with a small number of people, Madam Speaker. That would be irresponsible. So, of course, I'm going to have a look at that. I want to look at the evaluation and make a determination whether we can fund that into the future or not. But those 5 law and justice groups that are up and running, they're still up and running. Nothing's changed there. We're going to see what happens with that evaluation. So don't come out here and basically tell lies to Territorians, Madam Speaker, about things that are just not true. The other myth that Labor keeps speaking about is this failure of diversion. That's just couldn't be further from the truth. The fact is that under Labor, diversion was optional. A youth could come into interaction with a policeman or a court, and all of a sudden they are given diversion and they just could choose not to do it. It was never mandatory, and they're the kinds of law changes that we're going to be fixing this week, which are well overdue. So the fact that they're saying that diversion is this big failure because of changes we've made is just not true, Madam Speaker. Interestingly enough, I couldn't believe it when the member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝑉 was saying that the property crime is down only because Territorians are paying for extra security on their homes. Like, that's just baffling. For 8 years, Territorians had been screaming at the former Labor government to do something about crime, and they were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on commercial property security or their home property. So that part hasn't changed in the last 12 months. People are still doing that, and that is their right. The fact is, the reason why property crime has gone down is because offenders are now finally being held to account. There is finally consequences for people who break into your home. Before that, they were just dropped home. The police were a taxi service. Just absolutely appalling. Can't believe that he said that. It is again offensive to Territorians. Madam Speaker, I heard the member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀 lecturing the CLP government about a number of things, about leadership, about what needs to happen and what we have to do. I can tell you right now, Madam Speaker, we will not be taking any advice whatsoever from the Labor opposition. If they had a clue, if they knew what was going to happen to fix things, they would have done it. They had 8 long years. They didn't. The things they were working on did not work. It made things much, much worse. So, Madam Speaker, we will continue to work on the broken system that we've been left. I, as Attorney-General, have done a huge amount of work in that space, and there is so much more to come. We've had to appoint new judges. There's a permanent position coming up very soon. We've had to expand the prosecutions, making their staff, instead of being casual, which they were under Labor, make them permanent so they can actually work in the courts and have some certainty. We've funded legal aid and given them that 5-year deal, which is certainty, something they'd been asking the Labor government to do for years and just never happened. All of that work will continue. We know we have demand pressures, Madam Speaker, in the courts. We know that whilst they're working hard to finalise a lot of matters, and the numbers show that there are lots of matters being finalised, that there's still so much work to be done because the demand is still there. People are still breaking the law. And so we're still working on that. And I'm now looking at the legislation to expand those court hours so that courts and judges can work on a weekend to get through that backlog, to get through the demand that is still there. And that's something that we're really serious about, because we, on this side, will do anything and whatever it takes to try and make Territorians feel safer. That's what we were elected to do, and we will continue that work. The update today is just a very small part of what we have coming into the future. Obviously, we have our Youth Justice Act rewrite, which you'll see later this week, and all the changes we're making there, which is really important, not only for our youth justice officers that work in those facilities, but also for the youth themselves. They need to know that there are consequences, that they can't just climb up on a roof and try and burn the place down. They can be dealt with, because that's not good enough either. And then we're obviously going to have the OC spray trial come in for 12 months, and there are people right across the territory, women, elderly parents, all sorts of people telling me how they're really looking forward to getting that OC spray. The fact that transit safety officers and public safety officers are now going to be transitioned to the new police public safety officer regime under police, trained by police, under their banner, driving around in police vehicles. That's a huge shift in proactive policing in our suburbs, in our houses, which we know have a lot of challenges, in our bus stops, which we know have a lot of challenges. There's been horrific things happening in bus stops, and I know the Minister for Infrastructure is also working on the bus exchanges. There is so much more work to come, Madam Speaker. We've done a lot in 11 months, and we will not stop. We're only getting started. Thank you, Madam Speaker.